afternoon, everybody. Let's go ahead and get started for this first webinar Wednesday for SAAM 2021. So my name is Thad Graham. I am the education specialist for FSI Victim Services here at Family Services Incorporated, located in Blair County. So if you have any questions or comments that come up during the webinar, please feel free to throw them down in the chat or Q&A section as always. I will try to hang out afterwards and answer any and all questions or comments that you have. As always, there are handouts of the PowerPoint and presentation in the handout section for your use. So let's go ahead and get started. So today we, of course, are going to start off our first webinar Wednesday of SAAM talking about the history of the month itself. So our objectives today are discuss the history and importance of the Sexual Assault Awareness and Prevention Month, discuss the Violence Against Women's Act and its reauthorizations, and discuss, of course, what we are going to continue to do to celebrate and bring awareness to the Sexual Assault Awareness Month of 2021. So as many of you know, April is, of course, Sexual Assault Awareness Month, but it is also the 20th anniversary of SAAM. So this marks 20 years of Sexual Assault Awareness Month in April. Now, where does this movement start? Where does SAAM begin? The movement for social change and equality began to gain traction in the 1940s and 50s during the Civil Rights era. That being said, there was limited discussion on sexual assault and domestic violence, as the focuses were on other rights during the Civil Rights era. But those activities began to change the status quo, which allowed this movement to begin and flourish. So wide social activism around the issue of sexual assault continued into the 1970s. It started with the disruption of the status quo in the 40s and 50s. Change began to happen, and even more change began to occur in the 1970s when it came to recognizing and protecting victims of sexual assault. It brought support for survivors, as well as heightened the awareness of the movement. The first Rape Crisis Center was founded in San Francisco in 1971. And a few years later, 7 years later to be exact, the first US Take Back the Night event was held in San Francisco as well. Continuing into the 1980s. In the early 1980s, interest increased substantially. Substantial interest developed in coordinating activities to raise awareness of violence against women. Organizations across the country were already holding events to bring awareness to violence that was occurring against women. Time was set aside during October to raise awareness of violence against women's issues. We now know that October became the principal focus for domestic violence and domestic violence awareness. I actually have an entire recorded webinar on the history of the domestic violence movement and domestic violence month on our GoToWebinar and hopefully soon on our YouTube. Sexual assault advocates did look for a separate time to focus attention on sexual assault issues. Victims and survivors of sexual assault needed their own month to bring about change and to bring about focus on issues specific to sexual assault. In the late 1980s and early 1990s into the late 1990s, advocates began to hold events, marches, and observances related to sexual assault during April. Even before SAAM became official in 2001, these organizations across the country were organizing and were creating events together in the month of April. And some of these events lasted up to a week and were called Sexual Assault Awareness Weeks. In 2000, the National Sexual Violence Resource Center pulled sexual violence coalitions across the nation. What they found is that April and the color teal, specifically the ribbon, was the choice that the coalitions came up with. So SAAM was officially recognized and observed 20 years ago in April 2001. Like I said, the teal ribbon was selected as a symbol for sexual assault awareness and has become nationally recognized as the symbol for sexual assault awareness and support. Now, also during that time, the Violence Against Women Act was passed, or VAWA. VAWA was passed in 1994. It was part of the Violent Crime Control and Law Enforcement Act of 1994. This was the first comprehensive federal legislation designed to end violence against women. This was a big deal. It provided protections and provisions that were, of course, expanded upon by later reauthorizations in both 2000 and 2005. These provisions included provisions on rape and battering that focused on prevention, and funding for victim services, as well as evidentiary matters. It included the first federal criminal law against battering and a requirement that every state afford full faith and credit to orders of protection issued anywhere in the United States. That was a big deal. So a protection from abuse order or a civil protective order that was issued in Pennsylvania was to be recognized in all 50 states. It also awarded, as of today, well over $4 billion in VAWA grant funds to states, tribals, and local governments, as well as nonprofit organizations that are focused on ending violence against women and universities. So what did VAWA do? VAWA and its subsequent reauthorizations vastly improved services for victims of sexual violence, as well as domestic violence and stalking. It provided education and training, like programs similar to this, about violence against women for victim advocates, healthcare professionals, law enforcement, prosecutors, judges, and more. It included provisions to include a ban on states charging rape victims for forensic sexual assault examinations and the criminalization of stalking by electronic surveillance. So think about this. Before reauthorizations to VAWA, a victim of a sexual assault had to pay for their own forensic sexual assault examination. The victim of the sexual assault had to pay for the examination to hopefully find and prosecute the perpetrator. So unfortunately, VAWA authorization did expire in 2018. Congress was unable to reauthorize VAWA in 2018. It did pass the House, but it was not heard in the Senate. Now, that being said, the Violence Against Women's Reauthorization Act of 2021 has passed the House of Representatives less than a month ago. As of March 17, 2021, It was approved by the House of Representatives and is now awaiting consideration in the United States Senate. So those protections, those grant monies, those authorizations that made VAWA so great expired in 2018, but with hope, we'll be back soon. So now that we're out of the 90s, we get to the early 2000s. SAAM has been officially recognized across the country, and Sexual Assault Awareness Month programming is being organized and coordinated across the country. So what did SAAM look like in the early 2000s? Well, the primary goal of SAAM in the early 2000s was awareness. It wanted to raise visibility of the teal ribbon and the meaning behind it. In the mid-2000s, SAAM begins to change, and it becomes more prevention heavy. In the mid-2000s and including into the late 2000s, the focus is on areas of prevention, such as communities, workplaces, and college campuses. They are promoting ways for individuals and communities to stop sexual assaults before they happen by changing behaviors and promoting respect. It's very important to understand that when we talk about preventing sexual assault, we often think about risk reduction factors, telling women what they should do or shouldn't do to protect them. But that's not prevention. Prevention is stopping it at its source, changing behaviors and beliefs of perpetrators to prevent them from committing the crime in the first place. By focusing on things like risk reduction, all we are focusing on is preventing that specific woman from being raped or being sexually assaulted. It does not prevent the perpetrator from committing the crime. If someone wants to rape someone, if someone wants to commit a sexual assault, they're going to find a new victim. Until we change behaviors and beliefs at the source, things like risk reduction factors are only going to prevent the rape of the individual who is using them, and it is not going to stop rape and sexual assaults from occurring. So as we transition into the 2010s, once again, the goal is awareness and prevention. The efforts laid the groundwork for what we see today as SAAM. Now, each campaign does have a different theme, but every year the goal is the same. We want to raise visibility about sexual assaults. We want to share how it can be prevented through education about healthy sexuality, consent, and bystander intervention. Remember, prevention treats the problem at its source. It prevents it from happening for everybody, not just one person. So we need to teach about healthy sexuality, consent. What is consent? What does it look like? As well as bystander intervention. And of course, present day. SAAM today has focused on bringing in audiences beyond just advocates, beyond people who work within the sexual assault community and help assist victims. People who may not realize that they can play an important role in preventing sexual violence and preventing sexual assaults. People like parents, faith leaders, and coaches can become agents of change while sharing the practical things and ideas that each of them can do. SAAM has also branched out into Spanish-speaking audiences as well, with campaigns in recent years that include Spanish content, as well as content in many, many different languages. So, what are we, Victim Services here in Blair County, doing to bring awareness to Sexual Assault Awareness Month? Well, of course, today is Teal Ribbons in the Wild. So what that means is if you have a teal ribbon, or if you can purchase a teal ribbon, or have a teal colored item, we want to see you take pictures of them in the community, in the forest, in your garden, wherever you can think of. Place it, take a picture of it, and share it to our social media sites. Share it to our Facebook, our Instagram. Of course, all of the links are in the resources as well. We, of course, have our Webinar Wednesday series, which returned in full strength for SAAM. We have webinars every Wednesday. Our next webinar is on consent, then victimization in minority communities, and finally, sexual assault in the LGBTQ+ community with our guest presenter, Brittany Cervello, our helpline advocate. We hope to see you every Wednesday at 12:10 for these webinars. They are going to be really good, great content to celebrate SAAM. Also, on April 22nd, the Victim Services Program is going to be holding a live panel discussion and Q&A session on the community response to sexual assaults in Blair County. These are local people, local professionals that work with victims and can answer any questions that anybody has on how the community here in Blair County responds to sexual assaults. It is going to be a Facebook Live event. The link to our Facebook, of course, is here and in the description. If you have any questions that you would like our panelists to answer, please feel free to message them to our Facebook page. We would love to get as many questions as possible for the panel. We have the Victim Services Direct Service Supervisor, Cheryl Gonsman. We have Ashley Owens, the Director of the Center for Child Justice here in Blair County, as well as the Interim Police Chief, Jess Walk, for the Tyrone Police Department. I myself will be on the panel as well, and it will be hosted and emceed by the Director of Family Services, Lisa Hand. We are really excited to host this event, and we hope to see you there. Now, before we go, April is not just Sexual Assault Awareness Month. It is also Child Abuse Prevention and Awareness Month. So if you can, please check out our Center for Child Justice, the Blair County CAC. They just got a Facebook, and they are going to be having a lot of great information. They are selling pinwheels to help promote and prevent child abuse, to promote awareness and prevent child abuse, as well as to raise funds for the CAC. They are a wonderful item. I myself have one in my office, and I would highly recommend purchasing one. They are very limited in quantity, so please call them, visit their Facebook, and check out their resources. Also, on their Facebook, they are going to be releasing informative videos all month on how to prevent child abuse and how to protect the children that you love. So please follow them on Facebook. They have a lot of great resources, and they're going to have a lot more resources to help promote Child Abuse Prevention Month. As always, our information, if you know of anybody who is a victim of a sexual assault, please have them contact us, whether it is over the phone or by text. You can call our helpline number or text it 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 814-944-3585. It is free, it is confidential, and we will get you the advocate to get the help that you need. Of course, follow us on Instagram, on Facebook as well. And like I said, all of these presentations are recorded and on our Go to Stage at FSI Victim Services. You can also find most of these presentations shortly on our YouTube page. They're all on our Go to Stage within the hour after the presentation and can be viewed at any time. If you have any questions, please, like I said, I will happily hang out in the chat in the Q&A section as well. If not, thank you all for your time. I hope you have a wonderful afternoon, and I hope that we see you all for our next webinars, as well as our live event on April 22nd. Thank you. Have a great day.